show, and just as Glenn saying, a little bit of research of our own, that when we put people in the simulator and we give them questions, these are electrical personnel returning to work after an absence of a month of greater, not one person who's done the return to work course has ever got all questions correct in the assessment, which just shows you that's just one person with a month off. We're now dealing with hundreds of people trying to go back to work. So all I'm going to do is just little hints and tell you how the brain takes in information, how we process it, but how these non-technical skills can actually help and reduce these errors occurring. Perfect, Glenn, could you move to the next slide, please? So these are the 6 non-technical skills. You've got situation awareness, decision-making, teamwork, leadership, and communication. Now, the reason that we've designed a slide like this is they're completely dependent upon each other. We're not saying that one's more important than the other. They're completely dependent upon each other. If you take stress, for instance, every human being on the planet gets stressed. Those who say they don't are probably telling porkies. Stress has a huge effect on communication. If communication goes out the window, then that has a huge effect on situation awareness. If situation awareness is gone, then the ability to make accurate, effective decisions will probably no longer be there. If they're gone, teamwork and leadership won't be too far behind and leaving either. These are completely dependent upon each other. They are also completely dependent upon the technical skills, regardless of what industry you're in. Now, I'm not saying at the end of this presentation or at the end of our training course is forget everything that you've ever learned about technical ability. It's all non-technical skill. That's not what we're saying at all. Right now, technical ability, knowledge and understanding, relatively high. Understanding of non-technical skills might be that little bit lower. All we're saying is they go together to help improve safe and effective performance. Now, with these 6 non-technical skills, you can divide them down into 3 other categories, as it suggests there. Situation awareness and decision-making is your cognitive skills, what we take in and process. Basically, cognitive, what happens in your brain. Now, we only use about 10% of our brain at any one time. That's when it's a beautiful blue sky, the birds are out and singing, and everyone's having a wonderful time. The other 90% is in our pre-unconscious mind, which we have very little say in, especially when we're under stress and pressure. Basically, stress plays havoc, absolute havoc with situation awareness and decision making. Now, it could be somebody who's furloughed, somebody working from home. It could be these people who have still been at work, who are under a lot of stress, but a different type of stress because they're having to do extra work for the people who aren't in the office. You put human beings under stress and pressure, and what was nice and easy, bread and butter, about 4 or 5 months ago, when people return to work, or these people doing extra work, this easy, or not easy, sorry, but the daily stuff that we do, our bread and butter, can be incredibly difficult to do. What's nice and easy, you throw in stress, and human beings struggle to take in and process the information. So that's cognitive skills. You've then got social skills, which is teamwork, leadership, and communication. And then the last one is personal resource management skills, which is stress and stress management. If you could move the slide, please, Glenn. Thank you. Now, the one I'm going to focus on is situation awareness. As exactly as Glenn was saying throughout his presentation, again, I've got up the Yerkes-Dodson stress curve. You've got some people at home who could be furloughed, they could be working from home. They might not be as motivated or as much arousal as Glenn was saying. Human beings can get just as stressed when they're doing absolutely nothing. Now, I don't mean lying on a beach with a couple of pints, absolutely nothing. Doing nothing because some people can't do anything at the moment. We're restricted in work on what we can do. I worked offshore in Mozambique once, and I was there for 5 weeks, and I never lifted a tool. Not because I'm lazy and bone idle, it's because as a coring engineer at the time, the drilling crew couldn't find core point. As a result, there was absolutely nothing for me to do other than check the equipment every day, which took about an hour. I've never been so stressed in my entire life than I was in that 5 weeks. In fact, in the last week, I'm not entirely sure I remember I was in that country I was in. Not being stimulated cognitively and being motivated, we can get just as stressed doing absolutely nothing as we can on the other side of the curve, as Glenn was saying. We're going to have employees returning that have been furloughed, have been working from home, threat of redundancy. But on the other side of the coin, you've also got people who have been working more hours. They're having to take on more work because these people are having to do more than one task. We're then expecting, when things get up and running again, for people to have the ability to take in and process information. The bottom line is, it's just not going to happen, unfortunately. The brain has been in a very different place now, the last 2 or 3 months, and what it is that we need it for when we return to work. So our peak performance is, we normally say about 80%, with good procedures, good motivation, good corporate, all these things, good leadership, good teamwork, put it in 80%. So when human beings get put under stress, then it produces a bit of adrenaline and it takes it up to the top of the peak performance there. However, you've got some people returning from work or already in their workplace who could be at the top of this stress curve already. So when we apply a little bit of stress, it could take them down into the burnout. So it's a very, very difficult situation that we're in at the moment. One of the things I'm going to focus on is situation awareness. How can we help those that have still been throughout the work, and how can we help those coming back in to the workplace, and how can we help them take in and process information so they have a better understanding of what is going on, thus reducing errors that could happen. Perfect, thank you, Glenn. Now, all I'm going to do is use this nice, easy, basic model of situation awareness. As Glenn said, it's based on research. This one's based on Micah Ensley, and we slightly changed a couple of things based on Micah Ensley's model of situation awareness. Now, what is situation awareness? In its most simplest form, situation awareness is how we take in information and how we process it. So basically, it's having an understanding of what is going on around us. If we think of situation awareness with regards to a high level and low level, if you think of situation as a high level and low level, and basically sitting here listening to me, you could be in a nice environment, there might not be much stress, you're having a nice cup of tea, your brain should be able to take in and process information. Whereas when you put people under a stressful situation, the amount of information that we can take on board can be dramatically reduced. So high and low level of situation awareness. With the model of situation awareness, there's just 3 nice, easy levels. We've got what the brain gathers the information, it's also known as what. We've got interpret information, is known as now what. And we've got anticipate future state, which is so what. So basically, so what is when we're taking in the information, what does this mean for the next 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 24 hours? And it has to do this with every piece of information that we're taking on board. Now, it's a nice, easy model. We can go from level 1, the brain takes in information, it gathers the information. We then try to interpret it. If we don't understand, we can go back and forth between the different levels. It's not like that in real life. When we're put under stress and pressure, the brain will take in the information, it'll interpret the information, it'll anticipate, and it'll move on, and it'll start creating a picture in the brain. Your brain does not care if the picture it has is a true reflection of reality. There are thousands of pieces of information available to us at any one time. What the brain will do, like a little bottleneck, it'll go for information that it wants, not for information that it needs. Situation awareness is about taking information and processing it, but under stress and pressure, your brain does not care if it's a true reflection upon reality. The brain is incredibly powerful. It's also incredibly lazy, and it can take us down a dark path very, very quickly without even meaning to. Now, if we look at level 1 situation awareness, we take in information from the surrounding environment. So if we're fully focused, ready to go, absolutely loving life, there's nowhere else in the world anybody would rather be except maybe listening to me here, fully focused, absolutely ready to go, your brain will probably only take in about 30%. It will gather and process about 30%. That's people who are fully focused, ready to go. It'll take in 30%, which means we're missing about 70% when we're fully motivated, absolutely ready to go. Why? Because the brain has to go through this, gather it, interpret it, and anticipate it with each piece of information that it's taking on board. For those, if you're not motivated and you really don't want to be somewhere, that amount of information the brain can take on and process could dramatically reduce down to about 5, maybe 10%. We've got people maybe returning to work, little motivation, under a lot of stress and pressure, whereby their brain is only going to process and take in about 5 to 10%. That is quite frightening. Now, as I was saying before, situational awareness is a combination of perception, attention, and memory. And Glenn, if you could move on to the next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. Now, situational awareness is to do with perception, attention, and memory. All I'm going to do in this slide is go into a little bit of detail about how our memory works. So we've got two main parts to the memory, and on the diagram there, we've got the working memory and the long-term memory. What happens is that information will come in the working memory, and it will shoot through into the long-term memory. So what's stored in our long-term memory? And our long-term memory, it's past experiences. It's an unbelievably powerful tool, the long-term memory. We've got things in there we can still remember from when we were 3, 4, 5 years of age. Once it's in the long-term memory, it will stay there. We've got no idea how much information it can hold. We've got no idea how long it can hold this information for. It's an unbelievably powerful tool. So information comes in the working memory, shoots through into the long-term memory, and your long-term memory is like a book, and on each page is a past experience. What happens is information will come in the working memory, it will shoot through into the long-term memory, and your brain, the long-term memory, will flick through each page of the past experience, and using that one piece of information, it will try and find an exact match. From here, it will then build up the picture in the brain, and away we go. However, working memory, information, in it comes, shoots through into the long-term memory. If your long-term memory can't find an exact match based on your past experience, what it will do is it will go for the next best thing. It's called the false world syndrome. Basically, your brain has now created a picture that is not a true reflection upon reality. And is it easy to challenge these pictures or assumptions we get in our brain? No, it's not. It's incredibly difficult. Our brain controls us with the assumptions and the pictures we get. Why would we challenge them? It's incredibly difficult. This is where our brain can easily take us down that garden path. We've got a wrong picture in the brain. We've been working on something. We're not taking in and processing the information, and something can quite easily go wrong. Now, what does stress do to these two things? Working memory and long-term memory, they must speak to each other. They must. All stress does, and it's highlighted in the diagram here, is it sticks up a barrier between the working memory and the long-term memory, which means a big barrier there. Your brain's trying to take in information from the working memory, shoot it through into the long-term memory, but it physically can't because you've got a big stress barrier here. Stress plays havoc with the working memory and the long-term memory. All the long-term memory will do all day, every day, if information can't get past that stress barrier, is it will just make up a picture based on your own past experience. So even though there's things in front of you telling you that things are not quite right, your long-term memory can create this picture in the brain and easily take you down the garden path. Now, one of the questions, or one of the things that we look into quite a lot, is we look into accident investigations at PFC, and we also look into how errors occur during our simulator. And we're often looked at that it's not always brand new tasks or tasks that they've never ever done before. We tend to find that errors occur during routine operations. And the question that we get asked quite a lot is, do you see incidents or errors occurring when it's routine work or when it's brand new tasks they've never done? From a human factors perspective, you tend to find that more errors occur during routine operations. It's called confirmation bias. It's basically your brain is seeing what it's expecting to see. You could do a task 100 times. When you come, and it's got this preconceived idea of what it's expecting to see. When you come out, do the task 100 times. When you come to do it the 101st time, your brain's got a preconceived idea of what it's expecting to see. Your brain can't take in the information. It can't get past that stress barrier. So what the brain will do, it'll look into the long-term memory, it'll fill in the blanks with assumptions, and it take you down that road that you really do not want to go. We could have people who have not been at work or working from home, and we're throwing them straight back in to their organization. Their brain's not taking in information. There's a huge big stress barrier there. What's the long-term memory going to do? It's going to search for information based on 3 or 4 months ago, and it'll start creating a picture which could be completely different to one that they're actually faced with. What I'm going to do now is we tend to get quite a lot of questions on the working memory, and I'm going to get Glenn to ask out some questions. So this will be a test of our relationship, Glenn, because if he's picked all the hard questions, I know I've upset him in the last couple of days.
Never in any doubt, Scott, whatsoever. None whatsoever. So the first one then, so based on what you've been saying, Scott, how can you actually tell if the working memory is doing what it should be doing?
Oof, right. This is a very easy way to tell if the working memory is doing what it should be doing. And it's as simple as asking questions. If you're doing a toolbox talk, or you're having discussions before you start any task, or you're having a meeting, all you have to do is ask questions, but it's the appropriate questions. It's open question. Now, an open question is what, who, how, why, where, when. When you ask these questions, what you're actually doing is you're challenging the working memory. What are you doing? How are you doing it? Why are you doing it? You're making the brain think, and you're making it process information.
Right.
The mistake that people make is they ask closed questions. So they'll say, do you understand? Yes or no. Excuse me. Are you comfortable doing this? Yes or no. These don't challenge the working memory, and it certainly doesn't check that the working memory is doing what it should be doing. So if you're doing these open questions, okay, Glenn, what are you doing? One of the easy ways to check that the working memory is doing what it should be doing is if somebody can put specifics into the answer. What are you doing, Glenn? What board are you working on? I'm working on board 1 or 2. That's not a specific answer. That's not the question I asked. What board are you working on, 1 or 2? If they can't give a specific in the answer, it means the working memory is not doing what it should be doing.
Right. Yep.
Working memory can rejig itself very quickly. So if I say to Glenn, what are you doing? He doesn't really give me a specific answer. I move on to Asghar and say, okay, Asghar, how are you doing this? He gives me an answer, come back to Glenn. Normally, by the time you ask the second or third question, the working memory's rejigged itself, and they should be able to process information and give you a specific answer. Watch yourself. If you're asking someone a question, especially if they've been working from home or they've been furloughed, and the other people who have been working constantly throughout this situation, if you're asking a question and they're not getting it the second time, the third time, the fourth, the fifth, get them out of that situation immediately. It basically means these two things, the working and long-term memory, are not speaking to each other, and they're not going to process information, which could take them down that garden path.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Scott. The next one was, how does the brain process information?
Another good one. And first of all, Glenn, thank you for keeping the first question relatively easy for me, thank you. So the way the brain processes information, like I was saying before, it's unbelievably powerful. It's incredibly lazy. What your brain will do is it will take in the first 2 or 3 things of a conversation, of a toolbox talk, of a meeting, and it will take in the last 2 or 3 things of, again, toolbox talk, conversation. The brain tends to focus and process the first 2 or 3 things at the start and the last 2 or 3 things at the end. It's called the primary and the recency effect. So we'll take in the start, we'll take in the end, but the huge big chunk of information in the middle, all the brain will do is it will fill in blanks with assumptions based on your own past experience, and it quite easily fill in the blanks. So what you need to do here is, regardless of what industry it is, keep your information short, sharp, and concise. Don't overload people with information, because they'll take in the start and the end, and they'll just make up the middle as they see fit. Keep it short, sharp, concise, whether it's on the phone, on the radio, or face-to-face, so the brain has got the ability to take in and process information. Oh, but also on that, the way the brain takes in video is it tends to process what we hear first as opposed to what we see. So be careful. If you've got someone who's working on the phone or you're giving information over the radio, watch, because when you start giving that information over the phone or the radio, the brain will start to process the information it hears first, not what it sees. So without even meaning to, just at the time of you giving instruction or ask a question, you can actually change or manipulate the picture somebody gets in their brain. So bear that in mind. The brain will always process what it hears first, not what it sees. So just watch when you're giving an instruction or asking certain questions. Perfect. Thank you, Glenn. Next one.
Brilliant. Thanks, Scott. And the next one, what effect do distractions have on situational awareness, Scott?
Oof. So the working memory takes in the information and process it. When human beings get put under stress and pressure, the working memory is one of the first things to go. And this is why when you're doing your open questions, if you're asking an open question, by the time you ask it a second or third time, time's passed, working memories come back up to where it should be. They should be able to put specifics in the answer. However, when you get distracted, it could take your working memory between 4 to 6 times the initial distraction to come back round to where it was before you were distracted. So if you're going back after working at home or furloughed, and you're going back into the office and you get distracted for 5 seconds, it could take your working memory between 4 and 6 times the initial distractions to come back to where you were before you were distracted. That's frightening. What you must do is you must encourage people, regardless of what industry it is, if you're distracted, you must go back to where you were before you were distracted. You must, because the information during that distraction has not had the time to go from the working memory into the long-term memory, which means your brain will not process it. Always go back to where you were before you were distracted. In fact, Glenn, that reminds me, the chat that we were having this morning.
Yeah, I was just thinking that conference that you and I are taking part in at the moment, that was supposed to be at Berlin. It's 2 days and we've come off it to sort of support this webinar. That great piece Rona Flynn talked about this morning regarding the NHS. I don't know if you want to share that, Scott.
It was, and that's exactly what Glenn is saying, is Rona Flynn was talking about what you're trying to do when people go back to work is you're trying to slow down the thinking. And a great way of doing that is creating checklists. And Rona Flynn, if you're not familiar with Rona Flynn, Professor Rona Flynn is basically the guru of human factors and non-technical skills. She's phenomenal. And she was saying that they're creating checklists for everything that they do in the NHS right now. So they're creating a checklist for putting on their PPE, for taking off their PPE. It just means that your working memory, if you've got a checklist or a procedure in front of you, because it's written, it doesn't use much of your working memory. So if you make a mistake, you can go back to the start and you can go through the checklist. So checklists are a great way of trying to reduce distractions, but keeping the working memory going. In fact, unfortunately, my wife at the moment is on the redundancy list. And it was on Monday, I was noticing that she was really struggling with information. So what we're doing with her, it's the exact same, what they're doing in the NHS, is I've got a half-an-hour checklist for her. So she sets an alarm for half an hour throughout her whole day because she's struggling, she's under a bit of pressure, she's struggling to take in information. So every half an hour, an alarm goes off and she checks what she should be doing, meetings, this, that, and the next thing. And it's just small pieces of information so her brain can cope with it. Checklists are a phenomenal way of helping the working memory.
Brilliant. It leads nicely on to the fourth question, Scott, about what effect do distractions have on situation awareness and working memory. It kind of goes with that question quite nicely, doesn't it?
What's the fourth question, sorry?
Sorry, beg your pardon, is the working memory as powerful as the long-term memory? Sorry, it links in with what you've just been saying, beg your pardon.
Yep, ideal, thank you. Like we were saying before, the long-term memory is unbelievably powerful. We've no idea how long it can hold it. We've no idea how much information it can hold. The working memory is not the same. Like we're saying, the first thing to go when human beings get put under stress and pressure is the working memory. So even going back, if there's very little stress and pressure, the working memory is going to struggle with information. Now, the duration and the capacity of the working memory is completely different to the long-term memory. The duration, so i.e. how much information can the working memory hold, or how long, sorry, it's only about 18 to 30 seconds. Now that's when everything's beautiful and everything's going well and you're having the best day in your life. If you're expecting people to go back to work and hold information for 18 to 30 seconds, it's not going to happen. I'll be very surprised when people go back to their work if their working memory can hold information for 10 seconds. And the capacity of it, this Miller's magic number 7, I'm sure everyone's heard of this, I'm probably sick of hearing it, is Miller's magic number 7 is 7 plus or minus 2, which your brain can hold. Research suggests 7 between 5 and 9 pieces of information at any one time. That's in an ideal world. That's when all the birds are singing and it's a beautiful blue sky. That's not when human beings are under stress and pressure. When people are returning from furlough or working from home, and the people who are still constantly at work, I'll be very surprised if their working memory can hold 2 or 3 pieces of information. So this 7 plus or minus 2 means nothing, because that's not real life. You take it down, the human brain can only process right now, in the situation we're in, probably about 2 to 3 pieces of information.
Great.
That's me.
So I move forward, Scott. Excellent.
Oh, ideal. Thank you for that question, Glenn.
My pleasure.
Now, what we do, what myself and Engage Solutions, so myself, Glenn and Asgar, the course that we created for a client, is we focus on the working memory and we focus on situation awareness. And what we do in the course is we go into a lot more detail. So here, what we do is we go into where errors can occur and how they occur and what we can do to actually help individuals, whether it's when their brain's trying to gather the information, when it's trying to interpret it, or when it's trying to anticipate. But even before, one of the errors that occur in situation awareness is lack of clear goal. Now, what we do, we see this all the time at PFC. We put 6 people in a simulator, we turn up the stress and the pressure, and we see how they cope. Those who don't have a clear understanding or a clear goal, what it is that they're trying to achieve, tend not to do very well in the simulator. And myself and Glenn and Asgar were talking about this the other day, but this is now on a bigger scale. You've got one individual who doesn't really have a clear goal, has a huge effect on their situation awareness, has a huge effect on small groups. You could have companies going back after furlough who don't have a clear goal of what direction it is that they're trying to go, or a goal that they're all actually trying to achieve as one. So lack of clear goal, of lack of understanding of where it is you're trying to go, that can have a huge effect on your situation awareness. What we then do, we go into more detail about what can go wrong at level 1, level 2, and level 3. A bit of interesting statistic for you there, that 78% of incidents and accidents occur at level 1 situation awareness, which means the information is there, but because human beings are under stress and pressure, we physically cannot take in and process the information. So bear that in mind when we're going back after this situation, that it's taking in the information or gathering the information from the surrounding environment where human beings will struggle, and that's where most errors will actually occur. Last slide, please, Glenn.
Okay. There we go.
Perfect, thank you. So we've got people who could be on the left-hand side of the curve. We've got people on the right. How do we ensure that they try to get back to peak performance when we're going back after COVID-19? Ensuring people have an understanding of how the brain works and where the errors can occur will increase the chances of your employees sitting in peak performance. And other than that, thank you very much, Glenn. I'll hand that back over to you.
Fantastic, absolutely wonderful, Scott. Thanks very much for the overview. I'm just going to break with a bit of the protocol that I said, because there's been some fantastic questions come in so far, and I don't want to lose these. So, Bruce Durham, thank you so much, Bruce, regarding your question in reference to the Yerkes-Dodson law. You've talked about, do we mean stresses that are in place that get people thinking? Yeah, I mean, I know I've referred to being busy. I'm sure you'll appreciate, this is a 2-day course. We've tried to condense into like an hour and a half, but you're absolutely right. What the model refers to really is it's good for people to have a level of stress. And when they have a level of stresses in their mindset, then they tend to perform better. But I didn't want to start saying on a 1-hour call like this, stress is good for you, because I'm sure many people would probably challenge that. But yeah, great question, Bruce. Yeah, thanks for asking that one. Simon Cassin. Simon talked about workers who perform physical tasks, and they may well have reduced their sort of work hardiness and the physical fitness. And we did kind of touch on that in the COM-B model. But you're right again, Simon, we didn't go into a lot of recommendations about how to improve that that physical prowess, if you like, if someone's been off for a month or two. And there's a lot to that in terms of, that's one of the things where the government have tried to say, look, it's all right to go out for a walk to maintain your level of fitness to a degree. But again, there's a lot more that could be done, but not enough time on today's call. But thanks for that. Richard Talbot Jones. Richard talked about Yeah, brilliant point actually about workers who have stayed at work and are burnt out from lack of breaks and stress, etc. I think, you know, I don't know what you'd talk about on that one, Scott, but from my point of view, in terms of behaviour and burnout, I think it is absolutely going to be a big issue in terms of burnout and what breaks and what stresses they had. And again, that should really come down to individuals and almost an individual risk assessment based on that person's capability, because people are very, very different animals. But, you know, people who have been suffering with lack of breaks and, you know, in terms of stress and anxiety, you know, and in working long, long hours, you know, the things that Scott's touched on, you know, it is going to impact on situation awareness, stress, communication. Are they going to be absorbing information? So again, you know, it's a great question. And again, what we'll try and do after this, we'll come back to these individual guys and give you some more information than keeping everybody on this call today. But yeah, great questions. Thank you.
Can I just follow on from that question there, Glenn?
Oh yeah, please,
What
Scott.
you're saying about stress just isn't mentally as well. It's the health of the overall body. So the more stress and pressure we're under means the more adrenaline that your body will producing, which the harder your heart will have to work because it's pumping blood and oxygen faster around to the chest, heart and legs and preparing you for fight or flight. So people don't understand is when stress increases as well, it also has a huge effect on heart attacks, strokes, because your heart is under a ridiculous amount of stress and pressure trying to pump and keep up with the blood and oxygen to pump it around the rest of the body. Anyway, I just wanted to put that in. Thank you, anyway.
No, absolutely. And like you say, you know, the stress and anxiety levels it has on your whole physical well-being in terms of, you know, the spin-off of health conditions can come from medical issues, also aches and pains and muscular type problems as well. But again, more than happy to share some of that with you, Richard, after this. Another question for Glenn, no name on this one, but although this is focused on return to work, what are the key learning outcomes from today that can be applied to the current position, those currently furloughed? I will, whoever's asked that question, I will come on to that next, if I may. Couple of slides left to go. These are the intervention opportunities. So we talked about the behavioural piece and the sort of the cultural type issues and preparing people. Scott then talked about the human factor type training and raising of awareness and some takeaway messages for you guys. This is a very consolidated list of things that we've tried to give as a takeaway. You're more than welcome to do a screen print of this if you can, but certain things to help with psychological capability and to improve memory, attention and decision making. So individual and group goal setting and routine activities for home workers, work-related activities, quizzes and things, regular checking in with people by leaders to show the care, a phased return to work process, human factors training for managers and staff, access to third-party specialists. You know, it may be that when people go back to work, they're going to need someone to talk to, a confidant, and you know, whether that's a mental health first aider or a counsellor or a signpost to some sort of help to help with people's mental health and well-being. You know, people who are furloughed at the moment, it is difficult because by the letter of the line legally, people shouldn't be doing work when they're furloughed. But, you know, I've been speaking with a number of our clients and saying things like, well, you know, there's nothing wrong with setting up WhatsApp groups between shift managers or shift team leaders or administrative managers, having WhatsApp groups and having quizzes on a weekly basis to show there's an element of togetherness, that you're not in this alone. So although there's working things you can't be doing, there could be certain things that you can be doing to keep your mind active. I think a structure to a day is very, very important. You know, I'm seeing already people coming on to Zoom calls and, you know, they're not maybe wearing the usual working attire. They're saying that they're sleeping in and they're losing motivation. So I think structure to a day is incredibly important to keep people's physical and their psychological motivation going. And in terms of town hall meetings, and again, this is for motivation, town hall meetings pre-start when people get back to work. You know, town hall meetings are used very much in the oil, gas, petrochemical industry. It's to give people the state of the nation, you know, and if leaders can put people's mind at rest in terms of job security, having them communication briefs and doing them regularly and frequently and much more than you would normally do that. Pre-start checklists, Scott already alluded to the fact that a number of nurses have contracted COVID-19 because they've took the PPE off in the wrong order. And this has come out of some research where they've tried to say, right, we're going to develop checklists so that the last thing to come off are gloves and any sort of respiratory equipment. So you're not taking your gloves off first and then touching aprons and things. So again, that's to slow down the working memory. Regular interaction and opportunities for feedback and reassurance for the workforce. You know, and there's also people at, you know, C-suite level and senior directors, you know, these guys need this assurance as well. So, you know, it's good for them to be going out and talking with the workforce, leadership walkarounds, reinforcing key areas, and taking every opportunity to reinforce when people have done a good job, you know, positive message to people, that famous 4-to-1 ratio, you know, a positive health and safety culture is engendered where people experience 4 times as much positive feedback they do for the one area for improvement. Scott's already talked about questions. I'm not going to go over that again. And environmental factors, we've thrown this in as well in terms of restructuring, you know, the workstation, potentially more signage for people as subliminal messages, provision of PPE, nudge theory. Again, you know, if anybody wants to research that, it's a good way of trying to influence people to do something without directly telling them. And if there's any gentlemen on the call who have been through Schiphol Airport and the gentleman's urinals with the famous fly that's painted on there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, there's some real good opportunities there, and it's not exhaustive, but it's just to get you thinking in terms of some potential ideas. And the final slide is to take you back to where we kind of started. And this is the final message I'd like you to think about our business, DNA, our employees. So the DNA strand is 2 coils that are interwoven, often referred to as the double helix. And we talked about growing, about deoxyribonucleic acid is about grow, develop, safe, and function. So put that into a context of people. Do our employees grow safely? Do they keep the knowledge up to date? Do they ensure health and safety is a value in all that they do? Are they proud of their personal and the business safety performance? Do we develop our employees? Do we develop their skills, ensuring they're competent, they're up to date, and encourage them to continue to learn? Ensure their health and well-being is supported by ensuring the workload is aligned to their ability. So we managing that mental sort of cognizance of our employees. Do our employees function safely? Look at that there in sort of a bolded purple writing. Under normal / unfamiliar circumstances. You know, do our employees function in unfamiliar circumstances when the pressure is on? Do we help look after their health and well-being? Do our employees reproduce a quality product safely? So are we good at reproducing work that went right? And do we really take time out to learn from work that went right rather than consistently being obsessed with what went wrong? So lessons learned. Learn from mistakes, get it right next time. Do we produce and reproduce great safety ambassadors every single time? So that's just a couple of extracts I've taken. That makes up our organizational DNA of our people, about how they grow, how they develop. And today is really all been about this. Today has all been about how our employees function. You know, if this is not managed, it will not only impact on individuals' health and well-being, it will impact on our business DNA. And hopefully we've given you enough ideas and tools as a starter anyway to be thinking about that, which is all evidence-based. So I hope you found that useful. In terms of the final slide, I thought it was very poignant to certainly give respect to the NHS by virtue of Captain Tom Moore and what he's been doing as well with regard to supporting in charities. A big thank you to staying on the line. We've had 50 people stay on this call and been very patient with us, so we appreciate that. any questions, any information anybody would like from me directly, my details are on the screen there in front of you. You're welcome to take a screen print, take a photograph. You'll see there on the bottom, I mentioned in my opening, this is a series of webinars we're going to be running, and the next one will be held on the 7th of May, and that's all about project management, and that will be done by Barry Cooper. Barry is our treasurer on the iirsm North Eastern Cumbria Strategy Group, and Barry's background is in engineering and project management, and he's a guru in that subject. And we're going to be talking about this return to work process and associated risks and how to manage that from a project management point of view. So a lot of what we've been talking about today, Barry will be putting that into a kind of a project plan. So yeah, put that date into your diary, please. 7th of May. You're all welcome to come back on it, and I hope you've had some real value. So at this moment, I'm going to come back to Asger Nilsson. Asger is one of the regional members, and if there's any more questions that Asger has got for either Scott or myself, I'm going to unmute Asger, and let's see if we can get Asger on. And any questions? Okay, so Asger, over to you, sir. Oh, sorry, Az, I think your microphone's still off. Bear with me.
Hello, Glenn. Thank you, everyone. I've been monitoring the chat room as we've gone along and forwarded you some of the key comments and questions. So you've covered most of them, and I think it's been a very interactive, and from the comments people have made, very interesting presentation. And a lot of people are saying they'd like to hear it again. They'd like to see some of the slides and be able to reference them later. And I've mentioned that we will be running another seminar for some of their colleagues, or if they want to dial in again, and then publish it either through the Gauge Solutions link or another platform. But one of the comments were, and it was Bruce again, who asked and said there will be some people coming back who will be the top 10% performers, and they will hit the ground running. There may well be some of the people who are on this call. How can we use that enthusiasm and the knowledge, perhaps, of what have been gained today, to get people involved, and how can we sort of use that enthusiasm without it going overboard and going into the stress area? What could you say now for those thinking and planning to do something after this webinar?
Okay, I mean, shall I go first for that one, Scott?
Yeah, if you want to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of research that's been done in the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks by Harvard Business School, and their leadership and risk management part of the business school has published some documentation, and they've got some good webinars on this as well. And what it talks about is that top 10 of the performers, and they talk about basically, if you think about risk management from the point of view of if you look at the sort of a vertical axis and a horizontal axis, what we try to avoid is these low frequency, high hazard type events. And then you've got, moving down the axes, you've got high frequency, high hazard. If you take another sort of graph, the problem with COVID-19 is that if you take all of that, you can almost put it into a bottom left-hand corner of another graph. I'm sorry, I can't describe this, but the problem is with COVID-19, what none of us know is what the frequency of this is going to be and just how bad it's becoming. And in terms of a leadership point of view, they talk about when everyone goes back to the employment position, they talk about setting up sort of COVID-19 strategy groups. And one of the things they say is really harness the energy from these top 10% of people who are just naturally very energetic, very capable, very positive looking people, and get them on to that strategy group. And then whatever you're wanting to do in terms of communication, getting the message out there, harness that resource with those people with regards to if there's forums and there's workplace forums or leadership forums, try to engage with them people to be spreading the messages. And, you know, I think that's one of the first things. I think the second thing is trying to get that 10% of people, if you can, not all working together, spread them out a little bit. So, you know, if you've got, you know, the real top 10% people, and that might be 20 or 30 of them, don't have them all working together. Try to get them in amongst and identify those people who need a little bit more motivation and try to get them working together so it's cross-pollination, and that behavior will breed behavior. And then, you know, if you get the, you know, the first sort of followers following that enthusiastic person, then come your early adopters, and away you go with it. And that's how it can engender. So that would be my sort of view on it. Scott, I don't know if you've got anything else to add to that one.
No, that's a very good explanation, actually, Glenn.
No, that's great. Is that okay, Az?
Absolutely, and that really sort of concludes all the questions in terms of the series and the variety of them. So thank you for that.
Oh no, that's great. Well, all that remains is to thank everybody on the call for your patience, for your time, and please, you know, by all means, watch this space. This will be it has been recorded. It will be launched. There'll be an announcement on LinkedIn on our iirsm regional strategy group page. It'll be on the Gauge Solutions platform. When it'll probably be in the next week or so. But all that remains is thank you very much for your patience, and please all remain safe and stay well during these very, very strange times. Thank you very much indeed on behalf of the group. Cheers.